So let's begin with what is taking place, because I want to get in on the Diamondbacks and the Brewers series as well. But Manuch, this story kind of broke big last night, where former Cardinals executive Ron Minegar pretty much going out and saying that McDonough's claims he's dialed in on all of that, and I think it caught a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah, this hit last night, I don't know, about 8:30 or 9-ish,
right
somewhere in there.
Yep.
And Pro Football Talk had it, and a lot of folks picked it up in reference to Ron Minegar, who was with the Cardinals for 19 years, was the COO. Matter of fact, when I was doing the pre, post, and halftime for the Cardinals, was the kind of oversaw the broadcast.
You worked with him.
So I've known Ron for many, many years. And as you mentioned, Terry McDonough contended that the employees who responded to a survey indicated that they were fearful of Bidwill on a daily basis as a result of Bidwill's erratic and often abusive interactions with them, and that the employees were largely working in fear, which they attributed to interactions with Bidwill. Well, to your contention there, that's been corroborated by Ron Minegar in a letter that he had sent going back to December 18th, 2019, that Pro Football Talk had posted. And it's kind of interesting how when you go through this letter, I'm not going to go through the entire thing. Just go to profootballtalk.com or go to azcentralsports.com, and you can kind of, read it in its entirety. But he kind of starts off by saying, hey, you're not the guy I met in 2000. Used to smile, laugh a lot, you fun to be around, excited about the future, blah, 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 blah.
He's referring to Bidwill.
He's referring to Bidwill. Now, this is what's interesting. In the very next paragraph, Minegar says, I acknowledge that you have had to deal with a ton of issues this past year, but you become angry every day. You talk down to almost everyone. You become arrogant and condescending. You need to get credit for everything when things are going well and are quick to point the finger at everyone else when you're struggling. Now, later, basically confirmed McDonough's allegations regarding the employee survey, which is part of what has been sent back to Roger Goodell for this grievance. He says, quote, until recently, we didn't really have a clue how our employees really feel about working here. Have we created an environment that eliminates barriers to success and motivates people to excellence? Question mark. That changed when we got the first round of results from the employee engagement study. Sadly, we learned that a majority of our employees are working in fear. There are several factors, but much of this was directed at you based on the poor interaction that they've had with you. What was your reaction when you saw the preliminary responses? Question mark. Instead of leaning into it and trying to change things for the better, you shut the study down. And that's what McDonough had mentioned.
He did.
And also there's some other things in there about Minegar talking about shooting down some of the ticket motivations that they had and a lot of those kind of things. It also kind of went on to say that when Minegar had sent a letter when he retired to kind of clean up his act in reference to, becoming sober. So when he sent a letter to Michael Bidwill to say, hey, look, I apologize for my actions. I'm sorry about this, this, and this. Has nothing to do with this story. He just sent this a while back. So the response from the Arizona Cardinals talks about Minegar apologizing, being sorry about this and sorry about that, blah, 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 blah. So McCarthy, the individual that's the PR firm for the Cardinals in response to this story, has kind of picked apart a letter that was sent to Michael Bidwill back in 2020 that Ron Minegar had told him in reference to this story, I don't want you picking apart and putting out there what you want us to, for the people to pick or see based on what I said. And sure enough, what did McCarthy do, the PR firm that supported this? They picked it apart and made it look as though Ron Minegar was, again, the bad guy and apologizing for writing this letter, which he did not.
And Minegar says, I'm disappointed that my private notes to Michael Bidwill have been pulled into this dispute between Michael and Terry, and that's exactly what you were just referring to. He thought they were private notes. Now all of a sudden, they are public notes.
And to finish that thought there, Jimmy, he goes on to say, being Ron Minegar, unfortunately, they opted to pick and choose segments of the letter in an attempt to put their position in a favorable light. So I can guarantee you, Roger Goodell, and I forget what the one gal's name is that investigates a lot of this stuff. This is another piece to the Arizona Cardinals, the light being shed on Michael Bidwill in reference to a lot of emails going back and forth and showing what looks like to me, guys, if there's two or more cooperating with something that's going on there, where there's smoke, there's fire.
I agree.
Seems like there is a forest fire there in reference to how guys are being treated. Now, the one thing about the burner phone and the interaction with Steve Keim was not mentioned in this. So I don't know if Ron Minegar is up to speed with that as well, too. I'm sure the National Football League will want to talk to him about. Were you aware of the Michael Bidwill allegedly forcing the Terry McDonough's and the in reference to other people there, going ahead and having contact with Steve Keim with these burner phones, and then when Michael allegedly figured out what they're doing, made him shut that down. So that's the one piece you don't see. But as far as the workplace environment, it's corroborated, and backed up with the letter that Ron Minegar had to Michael Bidwill back in 2019 in reference to all that Terry McDonough's had to say.
Yeah, and I think the biggest takeaway when I read this article early this morning is that Minegar's frustrated that it got released, but he wants, since it got released, he wants the full letter released, not just snippets, not one page. Right? He's saying, hey, let the whole thing out of what I said when he resigned from the Cardinals.
So again, they picked and chose in reference to their response to make it look like, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He was a bad guy. You know, he was having all these issues and blah, 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 blah. But it still doesn't address the survey that was put out there that Michael Bidwill allegedly quashed before it got to his desk.
Don't you find it interesting they had to hire a PR firm?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean,
and here's the thing.
I can't believe
here's
that.
What's interesting, guys.
Okay.
That they have to respond.
Yeah.
That they have to respond in such a loquacious way, in a let me pick the right words way, to the actual facts of documents that are being forwarded to whomever. I'm just curious how ProFootballTalk.com got the entire email.
It was a good leak, I can tell you
yeah,
that.
and I think that Ron Minegar might have helped that around by releasing it to him. That's the only thing I can think of.
And in the article, too, it said how Bidwill reached out to him when this was all going on.
Yes.
And he probably mentioned just casually, hey, your letter is included in this. And Minegar probably was like, whoa, why would you mention that? So now Minegar is coming out saying, if you're going to put my whole letter in there, put the full thing, not just one
They
page.
cherry picked it is what they did.
And Ron asked him, Ron Minegar said, well, Michael, I don't want you to put a statement out there unless you put, as you mentioned, Jax, the full response back to you. And sure enough, he knows Michael Bidwill too well. He did that. He cherry picked to make him look like he was bad in reference to the apologies. And so they tried to spin it back once again, said, look, we have no comment. We feel that we'll be exonerated when the commission looks everything over and make it from there. Again, having to over and over again have a response to something where they should just go, we'll give our side of the story to the commissioner and go from there.
Well,